It's like nice. We love winter, but yeah,
Yeah.
those first few mornings are rough.
Yeah. At least there will be a lot of sports to do outside, so that's exciting. I don't know why I'm speaking like that today. I'm sorry.
Because it's Monday,
It
you
is
know.
Monday.
Mondays are a whole different day of the week. If
Okay.
anyone's watching, but let us know if you also think Mondays are
Mondays
not,
are rough.
yeah.
I know we have like a couple people on YouTube watching, and I know that on here people are coming in and out, so probably Wi-Fi issues.
You also think Mondays are, oops, sorry.
Oh, are you on YouTube? Amazing. Amazing. Okay,
All right.
I'm gonna share my screen, and then today we are going to talk about what your next steps are if unfortunately your visa has gotten denied, which can happen. That's okay. I'm sure it feels like it's like a big, I guess, overwhelming feeling and it can be frustrating. So we're going to talk about what steps you can take to really reflect on that and prepare for your next upcoming visa appointment, whenever that might be. We're going to go over some questions, and I'm sure Alyssa has a lot of advice as well in terms of how you can mentally prepare yourself for the day. So, and then of course, wait, I don't think we introduced ourselves.
This is every time, right? We just
Every
assume
time.
everyone knows us.
Alyssa, I know, I'm like just assuming that you guys know us. Alyssa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Alyssa Morrison, and I'm the Director of International Recruitment and Communications here at Minnesota State University, Mankato. So many of you have seen me on past webinars, or maybe you've met me abroad. I've been to many locations abroad recruiting amazing students like you. So I'm excited. I'm not excited that you're preparing or potentially had a visa denial, but I'm excited to share some tips with you because they really are impactful, and hopefully will help you out.
Thank you, Alyssa, and hello, everybody. My name is PJ. I'm the Assistant Director for Strategic Communications and Recruitment. Um, you guys have seen me in a few of our past webinars. And yeah, I am from Nepal, so I have been through the visa interview process. If you guys have already gone through your visa interview or are preparing, so I can talk a little bit about what my experience was like, and what kind of questions I personally received. But we're also going to go over some standard like questions that we have prepared that are more common during visa interviews. So hopefully that'll give you some pointers as you're preparing for that day. So I'm going to share my screen, and we just have a few things to go over today. Yay. I'm on so much coffee this morning.
How does that not surprise me, PJ? Because I think we both run on coffee,
Literally. Plus it's Monday, so
right? Yeah.
I but yay, welcome Future Mavericks. We are so excited to welcome you in the spring. You guys will be here in the spring. If you guys are going to be here, it's going to be, I guess, kind of cold. So, we're going to be doing some sessions on how to prepare before you're traveling to Minnesota and all of that good stuff. So definitely go in and register for those webinars as we're gearing up. But today we are going to talk about visas and what are some important terms that you need to know about, what types of refusals there are. And we're going to go into like reflecting on if you've already had a visa appointment, reflecting on that experience, and then moving on from there. And we have some helpful resources that we're going to be sharing at the end of our session. So definitely stay tuned. Um, as some important terms that you should be familiar with are what's called an immigrant visa and a non-immigrant visa. And Alyssa, please definitely chime in if I don't say enough. But immigrant visa is issued to a person that's immigrating to the US to become a permanent citizen for an indefinite amount of time. So if you get an immigrant visa, you're here to stay. Um, If you have a non-immigrant visa, which is what you're going to be applying for as an F1 student, it is a temporary visa that serves a very specific purpose, which is to get your degree, which is to study. And that's something that you need to learn to differentiate as you're preparing for your visa interview, because an F1 visa that you're most likely going to be going in for is a non-immigrant visa that's only for a specific amount of time, X amount of years, with a very specific purpose, which is to study. And of course, there's going to be some benefits like work permit, work ability to work for a year or 3 years, depending on whether you're STEM or not. But at the end of the day, it is a non-immigrant visa. And so you'd have to go back home after you're done. So that's something that's very important to remember as you're going in for your visa interview, because that's something that you're going to have to convince the visa officer is that you are going to return back to your home country after you're done with your studies, because that's served your visa.
Yeah. I think I would just add on, like PJ, that was great. I would just add on that understanding the difference in visa types is really going to help you frame your answer in a more productive way. Because you need to remember that you are going in to apply for a non-immigrant visa, which means whether or not they ask you if you have plans to return home, you need to spin your answers to always show that you are going to the US to study and then return home. So that can be a really hard thing to do, but remembering always at the interview, oh, I'm going in for a non-immigrant visa. And so I need to show that I understand what my visa is for, study, not working. And I also need to show that I'm coming home eventually. So um, many of us forget that because we get excited, we hear about internship opportunities, job opportunities, but that should be your focus throughout the interview. And we'll talk more about that later. So that's just like a little foreshadowing.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up, Alyssa. There are, so would you like to talk a little bit about this as well?
Yeah, I can definitely take this. So there are two very common reasons for refusal. The most common one is going to be 214B of the Immigration and Nationality Act. So 214B says that you have shown an intent to immigrate or remain in the USA, and that is technically a misuse of a non-immigrant visa. Okay. Um, it essentially means that applicants who have been refused under 214B, um, they go in and it's kind of like you're presumed to be an intended immigrant until you prove your non-immigrant intent. Or applicants are guilty until proven innocent, um, which is the opposite of our system here in the US, but it is on you to prove your intent to return to the United States. So again, when we're talking about that interview, 214B could be that you never really brought up something that showed that you had connections to your home country. But other times it could be something that is actually in your DS 160, or it could be something completely out of your control. For example, if you have three siblings and two of the three of them are H-1B holders here in the United States, the visa officer might say, wait a second, half of these siblings have gone to the US, maybe as a student, but now they're on an H-1B, meaning they intend to stay and work. So that's kind of a red flag to them because they might think, oh, well, if two of the four have already done that, this student is very likely to also do that. It's also really important to think about your extended family because maybe you have a lot of aunties and uncles who are in the US, and that might show that, again, they assume you have an intent to immigrate. So know that this is not always about something you've said in your interview, but by always spinning or framing or answering that question in a way that shows you're coming back, it is more likely that you will not get a 214B refusal. The other one that we do see kind of often, more so for graduate students than undergraduate students, but it's not unheard of for undergrad, but that's 221G of that same act. And so what that means is you have gone into administrative processing. So essentially, the applicant did not fully complete the visa application and or provide all required supporting documentation. So sometimes it could be that you didn't support it because it's not something that was explicitly listed on the website. So for example, maybe you're coming here as a computer information or a computer science student, and they want to know more about, are you doing cybersecurity? Are you doing data work? Like, what are you doing specifically? Those are things that you wouldn't necessarily bring with you, but they could ask you to provide a plan of study later on. The thing to remember about administrative processing is they will give you a letter, a physical letter that says you have gone into 221G administrative processing. You must submit the following, and they will tell you exactly what to submit in order to complete that application. Okay, so sometimes students email me and they're like, oh, well, the visa officer said if I change my program start date, then I'm like automatically in. Like, okay, but show me the paper. Because if you haven't gotten the paper, then I don't think that it was an administrative processing, it was a straight refusal. So, yeah.
No. So, like Alyssa was saying, the role of the visa officer, at kind of given what Alyssa said, is to assume that you are planning to stay in the US until you state otherwise or you prove some tie to your home country. So you have to go in there and answer your questions in a way, like Alyssa mentioned, that shows that you do have ties or you do have an intent to return home, whether it is to return to your, like, take over your family business, or you have family members that you need to take care of, or you have plans of starting a business. You need to be able to kind of integrate that answer into the answer that you're giving the visa officers so that you can convince them that, yeah, you're just here to study and that's all you're going to do. Because that's the role of the visa officers, is to kind of, assume that you're not going to return. So how are you going to be clear in the way that you state your plans and your future career to show that you will be returning home? We're going to look at some questions as well after this, and we have some example answers as well that you could potentially utilize and kind of frame it around to fit what your program is going to be. So we're going to look at that, but they're going to be looking at some red flags when you're answering is, do you have enough finances to cover your costs? If you don't, they're probably going to look at it and be like, the student can't afford to study in the US. They're probably not going to come back, or they're probably going to work off campus. If you tell them like, oh, I want to stay in the US after my program's done, that's a red flag. They're not going to approve your visa if you say, hey, I actually want to stay in the US after, I graduate. If you're not giving them a reason, like a clear reason of saying, hey, I have family members, or like this family business that I'm taking over, so that's why I'm going to be coming back. If you're not clear like that, they're also going to assume that you're going to stay in the US. And again, fraudulent documents. I think at the admissions, like international admissions, we're very good about like looking at the documents that you submit, and we're very good about noticing when some documents don't align or if they don't look real, quote unquote. And so we have a very stringent process in place to ensure that you're not submitting documents that are fraudulent or that are fake. And the visa officers are the same way. They are trained to notice those little mistakes or those little here and there in your documents that shows that it's not real. So making sure that you're submitting real documents is very important. If you have family members in the US and you lie and say, no, I don't have any family members, please know that they have access to those information. They most likely know that you have a brother in the US that's studying at X university. And so if you lie, a lot of times they're going to ask you questions to see whether you're going to be honest or if you're not going to be honest. If you're not honest, they're going to be like, oh, you're clearly lying. So being honest is the best policy, in my opinion, in my experience too. For my visa interview, I had my answers very, like, concise, to the point, with, good information that I will be returning home, but also making sure that I'm being honest because I'm here to study and that's what I wanted to do. So we're going to look at some questions again, like I said earlier, and I'll kind of explain what I said for my questions. If you guys have any questions about anything at all, please leave it in the Q&A tab. Or if you're watching it on YouTube, please leave it in the chat box and then we can get to them at the end of the session. If we have some time, we'll go over it, but those are just some biggest pointers that I have personally. Alyssa, did you have any other pointers at all?
No, I think just remember that the visa officer is there to protect the United States, and they're actually acting almost as a member of Homeland Security in this role. So, they take that very seriously. And I also know that many of you have gotten clarification requests from us on bank statements and us being very strict about sponsor letters and what your statements look like. And this is directly in a practice that we have because of we want to make sure that the visa officer does not have anything to say about your financial documents, and they're looking specifically at you and your case. So just know, they're trained to be a little harsh because they're protecting the United States, and it's not personal. They're not personally trying to stop you or block you. They're just doing their job.
That's right. Don't take it personal. Just means you gotta prepare.
Right? But
Yeah, doesn't feel like it, but sometimes it's really hard to not take it personal and to get emotional. So completely understand. But if you have been to an interview already and you were rejected, here's a few things that you need to remember to reflect on your interview process and how that went. Think back. I would recommend doing it when it's pretty fresh so that you're not forgetting what they asked and you're not forgetting what the process was like. But remember and write down the questions that they asked you. Did they ask you what major you're interested in studying? What's the purpose? If they ask questions like that, just write it down. What did they ask? Also think about the answers you gave. Were you, um, concise and straight to the point, or were you just like blabbing about literally nothing that answered the question? It's good to reflect on that because then it'll help you prepare for your next interview. And I know like it's probably going to feel a lot of emotions when your visa gets denied because you've worked really hard for this moment and you've submitted all your documents and you're excited to start your journey. But that's also why it's so important that you're preparing for that interview now if you haven't gone already, so you know how you're answering the questions. And we're going to give you some pointers today. But think about the questions. What did you answer? And why do you think you were refused? Do you think you were refused because you were not wearing appropriate clothing? Like, did you have your hair in a mess? Sometimes those can be pretty important because you also want to make sure you're dressing for success. When they asked you what in university were you going to, did you give the wrong name? That's important. So just remember, those are some very important things to think about before you go for your interview or if you're going for another visa as well.
I would just add really quickly on that one too, like when they asked you, why did you choose Minnesota State University? Like, how did you answer that question? Did you show them that you did a lot of research and this was the one that was the best fit for you? Or did your answer indicate more that this was an easy option for you or the first one to respond to you? Because that's that is a red flag to visa officers. It's showing that you're not informing yourself on all the decisions You're simply choosing the easiest path to get to the United States. And I do see we have some questions. We'll get those in, we'll answer those in just a minute. But I would really like to get through some of these things and then we'll answer those questions.
Yes, thank you, Alyssa. So here's some advice or suggestions that we do have for you as you're preparing for your next interview. You should be able to present evidence of significant changes in circumstances since your last application. You want to be able to highlight that you're a strong academic student, but how will you, and if you have limited finances, how will you overcome them? Did you get a scholarship at Minnesota State Mankato? That's something that you can bring up and say, hey, like I may not have like the full finances, but Minnesota State University Mankato has provided me with X amount of scholarships if we have provided you with scholarships. If you're admitted to the intensive English program, how are you going to communicate your intentions to the visa officer? Because you're here for the intensive English program. And if you want to like, Alyssa, actually do you have any suggestions for these?
Yeah, so, recognize your highlights and hurdles to the study. So, is that kind of what you were talking about here? Here's some things that I recommend, in your next visa interview, when you're thinking about, okay, what did they ask me last time and how did I answer it? Look at those questions again and start practicing at home to now add just a very short sentence at the end to show how it will bring you back home. So, for example, you're a strong academic student, but you have very limited finances. I know this is the case for many of you, okay? How will you overcome your financial limitations? All right. And so saying that you have a scholarship is really awesome, but what about the rest of your expenses? How are you going to cover those? Or even like you're very well funded maybe, but you're admitted to the IEP. How will you communicate your intentions to the visa officer? So backing up and remembering they're not there really to judge your English skills. If you're in an intensive English program, they understand that your English skills maybe are not as high as the native speakers. You still need to be able to answer some basic questions like, why am I going? So I really recommend that instead of just going in and answering, that you start practicing at home with a stopwatch. Like do 30 seconds. If your answer is more than 30 seconds, we need to start reviewing what you're saying because you could be oversharing. But the funding piece is really important and you really need to have a plan. Like, I know that I'm going to struggle financially, and that's why I have been working for the last 5 years in my home country of Kenya so that I can save up and know that I have a nest egg while I'm there. Or maybe it's, well, my parents don't have a very well-paying job, but my uncle, who paid for my secondary school as well, has said he will continue to support me in my next area. So I don't think you should really run away from your hurdles. Instead, you need to directly answer and address them because they know them. All right. You're not hiding things. They know what your hurdles are and they're waiting to hear a strategy. And then think about how you're communicating your story and give some really concrete examples if you can. So some examples we have here are I'm studying a bachelor's in biomedical sciences so I can pursue my master's and eventually work for a medical research lab in my home country to develop advanced medical technology. So notice how even just adding in my home country really changed that scenario and brought it back to I'm not an immigrant, I'm coming back here. In the next one, it says, I'm studying at Minnesota State University Mankato because it is a strong biomedical program with undergraduate research opportunities and small class sizes. so I can get hands-on experience with professors and focus on research with a faculty member. I was also awarded a scholarship, which helps make this an affordable program. So that one's really specific, and I know some of you may be able to be that specific, especially if you're a graduate student who has an offer for a graduate assistantship. However, sometimes it's not as easy to give concrete examples like this, but you can still do it because there's one specific thing that drew you to us. Maybe it's you met me on the road. I was traveling in the Gambia and I really helped you understand the process. And now you know that Minnesota State is a really caring place that's going to provide the supports that you need. You can say that. Maybe you could say, well, I have some friends there, and I know that I'm going to need a social network to help me be successful in the United States because I've never lived alone. So I've chosen Minnesota State University because I know there's a community there. And while I'm comfortable, I will have a better academic experience. Um, so the specific examples don't always have to be academic. It helps if they're academic, but it needs to show that you've done your research and you know why you're coming here. Okay, not why you're coming to the United States, why you're coming here specifically.
Thank you, Alyssa. Those are some really, really good advice. And like Alyssa said, just practicing, I personally would record myself um, and then listen back to it. That's what I did to practice because I didn't have anyone to practice with. And that was my kind of way around it, is just practicing and like Alyssa said, like keeping it within 30 seconds, re-listening to it. And if I'm using a lot of like kind of being like, okay, maybe I don't do that. Or if I'm not explicitly kind of stating my intent for the program, because I came here as a psychology major, I put aspects of that in that. So I just kept practicing with like a voice memo on my phone, because everybody has a voice recorder on their phone, and just kind of listening to it. Because you also don't want it to sound so rehearsed that it's like they can tell when it's an answer you've memorized. So let's say you've memorized like 3 questions. What if they ask a question that's not those 3 questions? How are you going to answer that? You're going to be at a loss. So don't memorize your answers, but think about why you really want to come to Minnesota State Mankato. What aspect or what element of our university, like drew you to us? There has to be something, like Alyssa said, that you're like, you know what, I really like this, or you really like the international community that we have, and you want to be a part of this like global Mavericks team. Could be one of those. So just like kind of practicing and listening to yourself answering questions really helped me, and I'm hoping it helps you as well, and definitely utilize. I mean, if you have someone to practice with, amazing, but if you don't, that's a great way to kind of go about it. Ties to your home country. This is another big one, especially if you have if your visa has been denied. Just kind of when we say ties to your home country, we don't mean like a physical, actual tie to your home country, but what key point do you have back home that you need to go back to? What important thing do you have back home? For some, it could be if you're a graduate student, you might have family back home that you're leaving and you're coming here. That's something you can bring up. If you have friends or career opportunities, if you've already been offered a position back home after you graduate, that's a great thing to bring up, because if you already have a job offer that you want to go back to, why else would you want to stay in the US? If you're going to be continuing your education back home, or if you have family members that you need to take care of, or if you have a family business, those are always great things to bring up, especially if, like, let's say you're in business and you have a family business back home, you can tie it into your answers, mean like, yeah, I want to do a business bachelor's in business administration because my dad has a company that I want to take over someday, and I want those skills that I can learn from the US, things like that. Visa officers are not going to directly ask you about your ties. They're not going to say, okay, well, why do you want to come back? They might, but usually they're not going to. So it's good to start implementing those answers, those key points into your answers as you're thinking about it now. Um, And again, give concrete and specific intentions of your study and your plan to return home. Like we gave you some examples in the past slide. That's a great way to kind of showcase that you will be returning home and you're also not going on like a long 5-minute tangent. Visa interviews are not going to be that long anyway. They're usually about 2 to 3 minutes at most. They go by really, really, really fast. So you don't want to sit there and spend like 3 minutes answering one question that the visa interviewer asked. They're not going to want to listen. It's not going to go in there, especially if it's like at 8 a.m. in the morning and a student is giving like a 3-minute answer about like your entire family tree. They're not going to want to listen to that. So start practicing these like questions and answers to where short, concise, to the point. I was actually talking to one of our social media students that came here this semester, and I was asking her about her visa experience, and she said her interview was what, 3 minutes at most. And one of the biggest things I asked her was, what kind of questions did you get and how did you answer them? And she said a few of the questions that she did get was, what are you studying? What university are you going to? And what's your plan after your program's done? And I asked her about her answers, and she said, yeah, whenever I answered anything, I always made sure to like tie in the fact that I will be returning home at the end. And I made sure my answers were short and to the point. So that's an advice that she has, because I was just curious to see how her experience was. And that was her advice, is to just make sure your answer is to the point and that you tie in your home ties at the end. These are some questions that you could most likely be asked. You can like kind of take a screenshot if you want, but also remember that we have the live stream recorded on YouTube, so you can always go back and get to these and rewatch this webinar if you want. But some questions that you could potentially get asked, and that's something that you want to prepare for, are why do you want to study in the US and at this specific university? I feel like a broken record kind of repeating the same things, but why did Minnesota State University Mankato call out to you? What was it? Was it the program? Was it the location? Was it the affordability? Was it the safety, the international community, faculty members? What was it that made you want to study at this university specifically? Take those key points. If you go back into your program website and things, that also usually helps. What are your academic goals in the US? Think about your program. Why do you want to do that program, and why is it relevant to your future career or the careers that you want? What are your professional goals after finishing your program? This is a great avenue to where you can tie in your home ties. How will you pay for your education in the US? Talk about your sponsors, history with the sponsor, and then how are they sponsoring you? All of those. And the last one, again, I've been talking about it forever, like ties to your home country. How can you convince the visa officer that you will be returning home? We were recently in a session with a visa consular from Nigeria, and these were some of the questions that they personally mentioned that they would usually ask students. And I kind of like took a note of those, and these were the questions. They're very similar to the questions that I showed before, but these were the top 5 that they had mentioned that I have here for you. So why did you pick this school? What are you planning on studying? Did you apply to any other schools? And again, be honest, don't lie. Be truthful and honest about, whether you applied to other universities, but why did you choose Minnesota State in the end? Be ready to answer that question. Did you have to take any entrance exams? And again, at the end, who will be paying for your studies? Again, these are very similar to the questions in the previous slide, but I just thought it'd be good to add because these actually came from someone who does visa interviews. So definitely take a screenshot if you need to, so you can practice them. And yeah, what are your plans after you finish school? All right. I'm just like checking the time so that we also have time for our questions. I don't know if we have any questions on YouTube, but we should probably.
No questions on
Okay.
YouTube right now.
What's your bring to your interview? I know we've done a visa prep session already, so if you want to rewatch that, you can go and rewatch it, but these are the same information that we gave during that visa prep session. So your I-20, your passport, your I-901 receipt. I always recommend students to take them in a folder because you're not able to take technology or phones into your interviews anyway. So just make sure you have those in a binder in one location. So when the visa interview asks, you just have it and you know where everything is and you can just take it out and give it to them instead of like you're not like making them wait for too long. It's also more organized that way. So these are the things that you would want to take with you: your academic transcripts, your bank statements, your financial sponsor letter, admissions letter, a photo if you weren't able to upload it to your DS-160, the visa application fee receipt, and any documentations you may have of ties to your home country. These are all information that you are going to want to carry with you to your interview appointment. And again, you don't have to take your laptop or anything. They usually have to leave it at the security checkpoint anyway. So just take what you need and don't take a lot of stuff with you is what I would say. Day of your visa interview. Yay. If you've already been through the process, you know how it's going to go. If you have not, and you're just kind of preparing for that, again, like I said before, you will go through a security checkpoint. My biggest advice would be to arrive early. I know I had a very early appointment, and I still got there pretty early because I wanted to make sure that there was enough time, A, to get through the security checkpoint, and B, to just kind of get comfortable in the interview room because there's a lot of nerves. It's just a scary experience. Like you don't have to be scared, but I was very nervous. So just to like kind of cool myself, I got there a little bit early. So it's always a good idea to get there early. And just in case there's like a holdup at the security checkpoint, you know that you still have enough time to get through it. Because sometimes like there might be a holdup at the security checkpoint to where the person in front of you brought something that they shouldn't have, and then now you're all waiting. So just make sure you're early. In the US, they say that if you're 15 minutes early, you're on time, and if you're on time, you're already late. I like to quote that a lot.
Oh my God, PJ, you've just made me so proud because I say that in every webinar.
Something you said,
Um,
yes, you said it in all
yeah.
your webinars. It's fun. I know the other one that you like to say a lot is oh, it's a quote. It's a quote. Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken.
Yes, that's
Yes.
a great thing to remember at your visa interview.
Yes. Yeah, sorry. But yeah, just make sure you eat a good meal beforehand so you have the energy because A, you could potentially be waiting for a long time at the embassy, and they sometimes will have a water fountain, but that's about it. You won't be able to get food or anything in there. So just make sure you're eating just so you have energy and you're not starving because when you're hungry, you can't really think. At least I can't. And so you won't be able to perform at your best at the interview. So just make sure you're eating. Dress for success. Don't wear a wrinkly shirt. Please don't. Please iron it if you're wearing a shirt. Try and dress more conservative, I would say, always. Just to be on the safe side, like a button-up shirt, jeans, that's fine. You don't have to, you're not dressing for a fashion show. So just be comfortable, wear comfortable shoes, especially because you're going to be standing up quite a lot. Most likely, they're probably not going to have chairs. So wear comfortable shoes, uh, comb your hair, make sure you look kind of decent, but definitely like I would dress a little bit more on the conservative side. And yeah, the interview will be at a stand-up visa window. So there's going to be a window, the visa officer is going to be on the other end, and any documents you have, you just kind of give it. There's like a little hole that you just kind of pass it through. But again, just remember your documents. Don't forget anything. And visa interviews are maybe like 3 minutes max. So it's scary, but it's going to go by so fast, you won't even know it. You won't even notice that it's done, or it's not going to be long. Here are some helpful resources for you that you could potentially utilize. Argo Visa has some really helpful YouTube videos that you could look at. It's a playlist and they have a lot of helpful like Q&A, how to answer questions, things like that. You could also, if you have like a more, I guess, specific case or for specific questions, I guess you could also do a consultation, but know that they're 475 up to like $789. So it's pretty expensive. But again, that's an option for you if you're able to like pay that fee. Otherwise, ZF Visa Guide also has a F1 visa course that's prepared by a former visa officer. So it's someone that's been through that process and been a visa officer, and they'd be able to guide you through. Otherwise, we also have a free prep session that we provide at Minnesota State University Mankato. Again, it's free. The link is on the screen, so you can go ahead and book a session, and you'd be meeting with a current international student to prep you for your visa interview. It's going to be a 30-minute session, but it's going to be, again, a current student that has gone through the visa interview process, and they'd be able to practice some questions.
It looks like PJ maybe froze on us. That's okay. We'll keep going and then they should be back very soon. Um, as we wait for them to get back on, I will go ahead and answer this first question in the Q&A, which is, my F1 visa was denied. What should I do? Can I book another interview? Yes, you can absolutely book another interview. Depending on where you interviewed, sometimes there is a time frame for when you can go back. Um, for example, in India, you typically need to wait at least 6 months before you can go back for another interview. I think the biggest thing to remember is you can book another interview. Just remember, you need to show what has changed since your last one. So it could be that you're more confident in your selection now than you were last time you interviewed. It could be that you've received another, like a different graduate assistantship offer that you did not have previously. I think one thing to remember though is while sometimes changing your sponsor can be seen as a significant change in your application, oftentimes a sponsor change is not enough to actually get you a visa. All right, especially if you go from one sponsor that they're already questioning to another sponsor that you do not have clear ties with and they cannot see the ties, they may really, really start to wonder about your financial situation. Because if you're constantly changing sponsors, that raises red flags. Why are they changing sponsors all the time? Do these sponsors not actually have enough money? What happens if they go to the US and now they're still changing sponsors all the time? How will they pay for things? Additionally, really think about your sponsor. Who is your sponsor? Why are they your sponsor? Is it someone that you've had a connection with for a long time? Or is it someone you just met? The visa officer is going to want to understand who your sponsor is, and it needs to make sense. Okay, so if your sponsor is someone you met online who lives here in the United States and you've never met them before, the visa officer is going to be real skeptical about that. They're going to be like, I don't know about that. This doesn't seem legit. So, um, yeah, I hope that answered your question about if you should book another interview. Again, I think it's if you're feeling more confident and if you feel like you have a change, then you should be good to reapply. Unless, like I said, your country has a time limit, like India, for example. Welcome back, PJ.
My Wi-Fi just completely died on me and then kicked me out.
Oh yeah, silly Wi-Fi.
Sorry, guys. Are we answering questions?
Yeah, I was going through the Q&A, and maybe, I don't know, was there anything really big on those last slides?
No, it was just the DS-160 and refilling it. So I think we're like basically done with the slides, but we can get to the questions. I think we have a couple more.
Yeah, I'll
Uh,
go. Oh,
no, go for it.
I was just gonna say, Dylan, so you were denied on July 19th and you're seeking to go for another interview. Does it feel too soon to go back? Or it's almost 3 months now. So yeah, I think going back to that same answer as before, like what has changed now and what makes your application stronger? if you feel like you've found those answers, I think that you can go back. PJ, I don't know if you want to answer the next one. So they asked, this person says, the question they asked was, which course are you going to study? I answered Bachelor's of Nursing in Minnesota State University. And they asked, since you've graduated, what have you been doing? I answered that well as well. So yeah, PJ, if you want to comment on that one,
Question
or I
again?
can too, up to you.
Oh, are they just asking how they answered it or how to answer that question?
I think so.
Okay, that's kind of what I'm going to assume, and I'm going to ask the student, like, what about the Bachelor's of Nursing program at Minnesota State University drew you in. We have a very amazing simulation lab that our nursing students kind of have the opportunity of, practicing as nurses. We're also able to get internships around in different parts of Mankato as part of their nursing program. So honestly, that's what I would point out is what exactly drew you in. I think that's kind of
Yeah.
the question I'm getting.
I think she also clarified here. I mean, I answered well, but they denied my visa. So I think one thing too, if they asked you what you've been doing since your graduation, it probably indicates they have some questions about why this program of study now, after you've already been in the professional field for some time. And so in that case, I think you really need to show like, yeah, my original degree was in teaching or psychology. But through that, I've actually been experiencing in the classroom child illnesses and seeing nutrition issues or mental health issues, whatever the issue may be. And then say how that led you to now want to study nursing. Because if you simply state, yeah, I'm studying nursing, but you were a teacher before or you were a mathematician, like why? Why are you changing now? And why do you have to come to the US? Those are all big red flags for a visa officer. And so, really showing how this program of study makes sense for you, how you've prepared, how you got to this journey is really important. And Shyla, I also want to say, like, sometimes, you do answer everything really well, and there might just unfortunately be something on your DS 160 that popped up. We don't even really know what they do for background checks. It could be the relative piece. Do you have relatives who've lived and stayed in the United States, or a relative who's overstayed a visa? It could also be, do you have a travel history? Like if you've never traveled before, why are you now traveling to the United States for your study? Um, so these are all questions that a visa officer is thinking to themselves. One thing you can do to help with the travel history is if you have the finances to take a short trip to somewhere for a weekend and then return home, that usually shows that you're more trustworthy with a visa. So as you can tell from my answer, there's so many different factors that could lead to a denial that unless a visa officer tells you specifically, it's really hard for us. But those are my things. If they're asking you, what have you done since graduation? It means help this make sense to me. Why is this your next step? Okay. Yeah, Shyla, you could definitely go ahead and book another appointment, if you feel ready.
Good luck, Shiloh. You got this. Um, should I have a relative in the USA so I can attend Minnesota State University Mankato? No, you do not have to have a relative for you to attend our university. If your relative, like, it's helpful for you to like kind of adjust the US, especially if they're in Minnesota and you're able to visit them on the weekends. We do have some students who do that, who have family members in certain locations in Minnesota, and those relatives are able to help them kind of get integrated and get adjusted to a new country. But no, it's not a requirement for you to have a relative in the US. Is there any scholarships that I can apply for before getting admitted to the school? So as international students, all of you automatically get what's called the International Maverick Scholarship. There's more information on our website. So you could definitely go there and look at what the requirements are, but all of our international students automatically receive this scholarship. So this is something that you could bring up during your interview. I know I personally did, is like, hey, they have this, and they have the scholarship and I just have to like maintain it, maintain a good GPA and perform academically. So that's a scholarship you can apply for. However, after you're here as a student, every February we have what's called the scholarship month. And during that time, you can apply for more merit-based scholarships. So that could be within your program, employment. There's like so many scholarships that open up every February. So that's another scholarship you can apply for after you're here.
All right, Imable, I do see your question here, um, which is, I think, essentially like, what do I do now that my visa has been denied and there are some capacity issues at the Rwandan embassy? So, I think with all the tips, you'll be good on your interview. As far as scheduling appointments, technically the State Department has said that you can travel to other locations for an interview if you have the finances to do so. So if you would like to interview again, you might, and I'm sorry, and if the Rwandan location is not open, you could seek out another embassy to interview at. There are pros and cons to that, of course, as well. The pros to seeking out another embassy is, of course, you are going to hopefully get a visa interview in time to arrive for the January intake. Also, it might, if you can fly to that location, it may add to your travel history, which could then potentially help in future visa interviews. But the drawbacks are, they don't know your home country as well. They may not understand certain hurdles or challenges that you have in your life that someone in your home visa office could. Another pro for doing it in Rwanda, the original location that you interviewed, is if you go back to the same place, sometimes it does show that you have true intentions of going to the United States, and you can follow up on that interview. Though most of the time, you are not going to get the same interviewer the second time. Most of the time, if one visa officer has denied you and you go back to that same post, they are going to ask someone else to interview you so that you are getting an unbiased judgment on the second interview. If you have any more specific questions, Imable, that I didn't answer, please send us an email and we can look into it further. But without more information, that would be how I answer that question.
Thank you for all of your great questions. Hopefully this was helpful as you're preparing for your visa interview, and I hope we were able to answer some of the bigger questions that you guys had. And again, like Alyssa said, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us and we'll try our best to answer those questions for you. And of course, like my final advice would just be yourself, like we talked about earlier. Take a breather, relax, take a few deep breaths, and just remind yourself that you're wanting to pursue an education here, and just to bring those points up during your interviews. And like I said, practice answering the questions before you go to your interview. Don't just say, oh, I'm just going to wing it. Never helps, never helps. So just make sure you're practicing before your interviews with the voice memos if that helps. just recording yourself always helps too, because you're able to listen to yourself. Yeah, that would be my biggest advice.
Yeah. And I think my piece of advice is remember, we've given you admission to MSU, and there's a reason we've given you admission. It's because we believe in you and we think that you're a good fit for our university. So take that confidence with you and, show the visa officer what you're made of.
That's so sweet. Yeah, be confident. You got this. We wish you the best. And hopefully I will see you guys in our future webinars. We have a couple more coming up. We have a visa prep session coming up, and we'll also have a housing session. All of that if you're looking for housing, if you already have your visa, or hopefully when you have your visa, we can talk more about that. But thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you in the next one. I feel like a YouTuber saying that.
You are a YouTuber.
Like and subscribe. I'm just kidding. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great night, afternoon, day, wherever you are. It was really lovely to meet you this afternoon, and we'll see you again. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Alyssa.